Just allow ourselves the beauty of that inner sense of the presence. You notice that song was When I Pray. It wasn't When I Pray, I Get Lots of Stuff. I didn't hear that line in there. And yet a lot of times, frankly, when we want stuff, we pray. No, that one went right to the core of things. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper into my God. I feel my soul go deeper into my God. I feel my love go deeper into my God, and God can be by whatever name, as you know it. God doesn't care what you call it. It's I love to call it presence or infinite or the one or God, Spirit. I think the important thing is whatever resonates with you. When you're quiet and listening to Bob sing, when you were listening to Jaron do that beautiful meditative prayer, it's almost beyond a name, isn't it? Whatever. But that's the place to go. So this is in line with what I started talking about last week. And last week I was emphasizing being instead of doing, and we're still going to go there today. And so, I have to say, in our, quote, real world, we might say, well, that's just a lovely song and a very lovely idea for Sunday morning when I'm sitting in church. But I have problems, I have bills to pay, I have people in my life to deal with, I have job to go to, I have demands on my life, and I'm not sure that, how do I connect those dots? And in our humanness, of course, our first tendency then in our walking around world is to go outside and not go within, is to get busy and look everywhere outside for the solutions, the answers, the resources, whatever we need, not going immediately within to where our heart is more in touch with our God, where our soul is more in touch with our God. And that is a form of prayer. And prayer is so often the last resort. It's kind of like we try everything. Well, I might as well pray. So, not this group, of course, but you might have some relatives and friends that, you might want to enlighten a little bit. No, we don't do that. We don't do that. This is for you, not for you to preach out at everyone else. Just saying. But so instead of looking outside for solutions, for resources, for answers, why might it be more effective to go within, to look inside? And as last week I talked about the power of being instead of running around and doing. And so we're focusing that more into the practice of prayer today. So again, the same reasons that I shared with you last Sunday apply today. Why does it make more sense really to go within instead of be running around outside looking for everything I think I need? And the first thing is it's just such a relief. As I mentioned last week too, on a daily basis, I find myself absolutely inundated with noise from the outside. Fear, conflict, chaos, anger, frustration, blame, finger pointing, and that's just in the first, 30 to 60 seconds when I turn on my iPhone or my iPad in the morning. How about you? So, what a way to start the day. So I gotta say, right off the bat, at that point, against that backdrop, as in that song, I find that I am more than ever leaning into what I know to be the greater truth, beyond the noise. Turning my attention away from all of that, instead of trying to say, how can I pray to fix it? Just turning my attention within and leaning into, as I said, that greater truth, which is at the core of this beautiful teaching of science of mind and the spiritual tools that we share all of the time, tools for living. And that greater truth is this, that there is one one source. It is infinite. It is the source of everything that we seek, and we access it by going within, by turning our attention from looking at what's going on outside to what the song said, going within, praying. And when I pray, I'm in touch with my source. And that is so clear, and it's such a pure, refreshing truth, because I don't have to make a series of steps to explain it to myself or analyze it. I just go there. And it's like a breath of oxygen to my soul. And it lifts me in an instant, anytime, anywhere, out of the tumult and into the inner level of the place where there is that one source. And when I do that, I find peace and guidance. And then I'm led from that to action. And of course, as you all have experienced too, ordinary miracles along the way. It's a matter of where we start, starting within when I pray. Now, the second reason, as I mentioned last week, but I want to share with you again, because it's just sometimes it goes against our conditioning, which is I go within to find my good. Not outside to people, places, and things, but I go inside to find my good, and I say it that way because, as Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was that brilliant early New Thought teacher, put it, she said, "My good is my God, and my God is my good. My good is my God is my good." Oh my God, is that blasphemy or what? No, it is not. And she explains it in great detail, but I'm going to net it out and just say that, think about it. Behind all of our desires for good in our life, whether it might be a new home, a new relationship, a new job, a new way of living, a new something, a new experience, all of them, behind them is really this innate impulse to expand and grow into our possibilities. Can you think of anything that you desire that really in the end result is you want it because it's going to shrink you, because it's going to shrink your life, it's going to make you less than? No. Behind our desires is that what the Creator created us to be, the move toward our possibility. So in that, when we look at it that way, yeah, one-stop shopping, I'm going within to find my good, because in there is my God. And that's what my God, my Creator, wants for me. And so this is about being an inner focus instead of the outer doing. And as I mentioned last week, as you can tell by my lovely accoutrements on my leg and foot and my cane and everything, this was brought about because I had a procedure done on my foot for tendonitis, and the doctor's orders were to stay off that foot as much as possible, and then wear this lovely boot to protect it. Literally, he was telling me to be more and do less. And, while typically my idea of a productive day, and yours probably too, is about doing a lot of things, I really had to back away and just be instead of doing. And the point of that is really makes a lot of sense, is to get out of the way of my body's knowing how to heal itself. But if I keep tromping on that foot and not wearing the right gear on it and so on, I'm interfering with what my body wants to do and knows how to do. Getting out of the way of its intelligent process of healing. And by the way, that's a great thing to keep in mind in any situation. There's always an intelligence, that infinite one source, that one mind that we always talk about here, that is just literally the connection of us all in with the infinite, in, as, and through us. And its one impulse is wholeness, is the revealing of our possibilities and our wholeness and our health and our well-being. So why not stop thrashing around and step back? Let go, let God, let the good times roll. Get out of the way. Now, Dr. Ernest Holmes, the architect of our philosophy, put it this way. He said, "You must become more And that means become more in thought, in consciousness, in your imagination, in your perception, if you wish to draw greater good into your life. Become more. He didn't say you have to do a whole bunch of affirmations, you have to do a whole list of things, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. No, he said you have to be more if you want more good in your life. So we're continuing to look at what that means to us. And the reason, of course, for him saying that is because, frankly, when you and I become more in how we see things, in our perspective, in our consciousness, in our thought, what we're doing is increasing our capacity to receive our good. We're increasing, it's all there. It's all for us. As the Bible says, the gift is already given. It's all there. And when we become more in how we're viewing all of this, including ourselves and our possibilities, we increase our capacity to receive it. So it isn't about if I beg harder, if I ask more fervently at all, is it? It's already there. So being more is the thing that we're focusing on. Another one of our authors, New Thought authors, Dr. Raymond Charles Barker, a teacher, minister, he wrote it this way. He said, "The secret is a simple one. It is the clear concept that creation begins and ends within the consciousness of the individual. Begins and ends within the consciousness of the individual." Remember, don't get thrown by, most of you know what I mean by consciousness, but just in case, remember, it's your thoughts, your beliefs, your perception, your imagination, all of that. So this is about how we think. And this is about how we pray. Prayer is a powerful, very focused tool for being more. You can do it anytime, any place. Last week I was talking more in general about how we think and go through our day and how we can be more. And when we pray in a very affirmative way, as I'm going to be talking about, that's a focused way of being more. Prayer is a very intentional way of thinking. Now, that may fly in the face of how a lot of us were trained early on. And this is not to criticize or malign the way, if people who do, however anyone prays, that is their personal practice. So I'm not criticizing that at all. But I have noticed that in this philosophy and in my personal life, as I've learned that prayer is not a tool for learning how to ask for more things to happen and hope that a capricious and a moody God gives them to me, that prayer is a tool for being more. It's very intentional, a very intentional way of thinking. In fact, Dr. Ernest Holmes wrote it this way. In one of our books, he said, prayer is a mental attitude. Every word is an expression of a thought. And so the ultimate essence of prayer is your thought. What kind of thought? He goes on to say, a simple and direct and positive believing mental attitude. That is prayer that is effective, that opens us up to be able to receive. And I must say, my mother was a very, very fervent fundamentalist Christian woman all of her life, and her prayer life was her top priority. And even though her words were different than what I would use or what this philosophy might use, even as Dr. Ernest Holmes said, if the intention and the frame of mind behind it is about acceptance and knowing and faith and trust, then whatever words, go for it. So Mom used to tell God what to do, basically. I mean, she prayed and prayed and prayed a lot for everything. And I noticed, though, in that verbiage was always, you promised. God, you promised. It's in the Bible. You promised. So bring it on. I mean, those are kind of my interpretation, but it wasn't far off. So I'm sharing that because I don't want you to get caught up in what the verbiage might be, although what happens is words help to shape how we think, don't they? So that's the point of shifting to a more affirmative choice of words. So Dr. Holmes called prayer, affirmative prayer, what we're calling affirmative prayer, and as you heard Jaron say, also spiritual mind treatment. He called it that because it's really treating our minds to a new idea. Treat your mind to a new idea. Not petitioning, not wondering, but treating our mind to a new idea of it already is and I'm open to receive. Because the practice of science of mind, the philosophy of it, is all about the empowerment and the peace that comes from changing our thinking. And so changing our words really helps change the thinking. It's about changing from constantly dwelling on what's wrong to dwelling on what's possible. It's so easy to slip into the vernacular of the day with what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. And this philosophy and this way of praying invites us to change that to what's possible. We don't have to say what's possible because we may not know, but to know that there is always something wonderful possible that is, again, in the process of life, continuing to move toward its wholeness. It's changing our thinking from looking at the outer appearances to knowing, again, on the inner world, in the inner world of the infinite, anything is possible. As one minister used to always say, lack of evidence is not evidence of lack. It's changing our thinking that way. That's pretty potent. Take that this week. Every time you're looking at something that seems like a really daunting problem or challenge, say, that seems to be evidence of lack, or lack of evidence, but it is not ever evidence of lack. It's recognizing that what all the great teachers, spiritual teachings have declared, that our good is at hand. It's there for us to receive according to our belief. So effective prayer is about ramping up our own belief. It's not about changing God's mind. It's about changing our own mind. Dr. Ernest Holmes said, "It is not for the purpose of making things happen. It's to provide within yourself an avenue through which they may happen." And by the way, let me let you know that there's going to be another wonderful 4-week class coming up, taught by 6-week class. It's going to be a powerful class. I'll let him tell you the details. Maybe I shouldn't get into that. I just want you to know, if you want, this is something that is so rich and juicy, and it isn't all going to be about prayer. It's going to be about, naturally, changing our thinking and a variety of ways of doing that. But that class is coming up in about a month, I think, in April. So stay tuned because there will be more opportunity to explore and to answer questions that you may have. So it's not about making things happen, about making things welcome. As one of our ministers wrote a long time ago, he used to sign off all his emails with this: "I don't always get what I'm looking for, but I always get what I'm looking from." Being, be more. Well, how does this happen? Well, that's a whole body of exploration that's fascinating because it's about how science is now catching up with what we're saying, how the universe actually works. But Thomas Troward, who was an influence on Dr. Ernest Holmes 100 years ago, he said, "We live in the midst of a natural law that creates material conditions which are exact reflections of our thoughts." That's the way it works. That's the law. Quantum physics, quantum mechanics, they're all bearing it out now in various ways. We live in the midst of that. That's why when we're doing affirmative prayer, our thoughts, our affirming thoughts, are going to be reflected in our experience. I have an example of a beautiful affirmative prayer that was written by one of our practitioners, Jim Grove. And he just wrote it last week. We were talking about the craziness going on around the coronavirus and, of course, the coming election and the political stuff in the world and so many things going on. And there's a lot of tumult and a lot of fear and a lot of chaos about that. And so Jim sat down and wrote this incredible affirmative prayer. And by the way, there were excerpts of it, or I'm going to share excerpts of it, but the whole thing is in our email newsletter, and it will be in each week for this month. So when you get that newsletter, scroll down to that prayer and use it for yourself. In fact, as I'm going to share part of it with you now, Because it's a perfect example of what I've been talking about changing how we think to an affirmative way, to not looking at what's not working, but looking at what's possible. And you can take this for yourself. Right now, I make a conscious choice to go within to that place of pure joy and peace at the center of my being. That place is where I find my connection to the divine presence, which is God. As Bob sang, when I pray, I go within and find my God. Conscious of this connection to the infinite source of all, I am calm and in harmony with all of life. I realize I don't have to keep trying to do more because God is already all that I am, and that is enough. The hectic pace of the world around me no longer affects me negatively. In fact, I observe it with a fresh perspective, from God's perspective. So as I release all attachment to specific outcomes, I flow with life and change, remembering that harmony and balance are mine now and always. In gratitude and complete confidence that my word has been received by the law of mind, I release it now to accomplish its good and perfect work, and so it is. Now, isn't that a marvelous container for receiving our good? I'm going to guess that when Jim wrote that, he was probably had one foot, like me, one foot in the, things are getting a little wonky out there, to, wait a minute, but I know a greater truth. But see, he didn't have to be in a place, I'm assuming you weren't in a place of perfect walking on water, knowing. But the point is, he pulled those words out of his consciousness. He knew, because he knew that as he did that, it created a bigger space, a different space, a different energy. And if you didn't sense it when I was reading it, if you read it again for yourself later, notice how it shifts your inner feeling. From trying to figure out, what am I going to do if, to, I know there's something taking care of it. I want to also tell you that it is in your bulletin. So you have it in paper form to take with you as well today and reflect on it. And furthermore, if you are also wanting to know more about the power and practice of affirmative prayer, we have this little brochure on the book table. It's in a little stand-up holder there. It's free. Just take it and look it over too, because it will give you even more insight. It's so simple, affirmative prayer. It's just that it's a change of thinking that can make it a bit challenging at times. So, this is about being more in consciousness, and therefore being open to receive. Now, remember I said that the words are lovely, but whatever works for you. So I have a story. This couple was taking one of our Science of Mind classes, and so one of our centers, and husband was writing these beautiful treatments, affirmative prayers. Oh, they were just wonderful, kind of like Jim's, just really spot on. And his wife was struggling. She was having trouble with them. Well, turns out she got a little bit ill, not terminally serious, but she was kind of sick. And meanwhile, he had to go away for a few days. So he said, well, while I'm gone, honey, you can use my prayers, and they should help you. Well, he got back home, and she was just all well and perky and everything. And he said, I'm so glad to see that. See, my prayers worked. I'm sure you found them very useful. She said, no. They were too complicated for me. I just made up my own. Oh, hell, I'm well. I give you that. Don't say we didn't send you away with something you could plug and play right now. One more thing. Prayer really invites us to an easier path, believe it or not. Life does not have to be a struggle. Dr. Holmes writes this: back of every event, the smallest concept or thought you entertain, and I'm going to insert affirmative prayer, The slightest effort you make, there is an inexhaustible reservoir of life, of imagination, and energy of God flowing through you into action. So when we're praying, we're mobilizing an incredible power. And it's so easy. It isn't about a struggle. And I love the biblical passage where Jesus said, "My yoke is easy, my burden is light." So Holmes goes on and he affirms then, he says, "Because of this, I am putting my whole trust and confidence in the good. I move with ease and I accomplish without strain." Be more, do less. So in closing, I have another story, an example of how this worked in a very practical way. When I went up to see my grandson get his Air Force wings in January up in Pensacola at the naval base, it was quite a marvelous experience for me, and a whole other world. And he took us on a tour of everything, and one of the things he showed us was a flight training simulator. Has anybody ever been in a flight simulator? I mean, it's like you're really in the plane, and they have a screen all around and over you and everything, and it's just like you're flying in a real situation. And it's, all of that is moving, and it's a real plane cockpit, because it is used for training of these young men and women. So he took us in there, and there was a retired Air Force Navy pilot, or Air Force pilot, excuse me. I'm not military. You can tell me I don't know all those terms, but I'm doing my best. A retired pilot, and he was setting up all these scenarios for practicing flying this plane. All the kind of dangerous things that one might encounter in combat and otherwise. And he invited each of us to get into that cockpit and try it. And I was tempted, but I demurred. I said, "You do it." So my stepson-in-law, Sam's dad, Mark, he couldn't wait to get in. So he got in there, and the facilitator was putting up all kinds of scary different scenarios that he had to fly through and around, and even had the plane turning upside down, and enough to really curl your hair. And Mark was loving it all. And there's a control stick that he had to hold on to keep the plane level. Among other things, watching, the controls or the gauges, he had gotten a little mini tutorial. So after he did this for about 30 minutes, and finally emerged, and he was so proud because he had not crashed the plane. And but he said, "Oh, my arm is just killing me. It's so sore." And I mean, it's holding onto that control stick, if you can imagine trying to control a jet plane with that. Well, he did that despite the fact that the instructor had repeatedly been telling him, shouting at him. Yeah, there's a lot of jet plane noise in that simulator too. But they had headphones, and he was trying to get Mark to notice something called a trim device. And it's just a little device either on the control stick or by it. And here's what it does, and this is how my grandson described it. He said, "Dad was struggling with how to use the trim device in the cockpit." And he said the best way to describe it is that trim tabs are those small flaps on adjustable hinges found on the aircraft wings, and they continually adjust and stabilize the plane. They equalize the aerodynamic forces, he said, that are being exerted on the plane, which you can imagine, again, a jet going at hundreds of miles an hour. And when they're adjusted properly, of course, they let the aircraft maintain a nice, straight, and level flight with almost zero input or force required on the control stick, provided you use the trim tab thing, the little optional thing to use that the facilitator was trying to get Mark to hear and to use. And my grandson said, "Well, when this is done correctly, the plane can literally be flown with just 2 fingers. But when improperly used or ignored, as Dad did," he said, "the pilot is forced to fight against every force placed on the plane using actually brute strength. So it could have been so much easier had Mark used that trim device instead of trying to. Now, how many times do we go through life hanging onto that control stick and trying to keep things on an even keel when, like Ernest Holmes said, doesn't have to be that way. We got our own trim device back of every event, the smallest concept or thought you entertain, the slightest effort you make. There is an inexhaustible reservoir of life, of imagination and energy flowing through you into action. Be more and do less. Pray. Turn your attention, your point of view from the problems to the possibilities. Because there are no impossible things. There are only things that aren't possible from your point of view. There are no impossible things. Oh, hello. He does that for emphasis. We practice that. There are only things that are impossible from your point of view. Remember that. And so Bob is going to anchor this with a wonderful song by Melissa Felipe called Infinite Possibilities. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.